And in the news this week, there's been talk of Fabio Cannavaro coming over to the Premier League, and trying his hand at management over here. You know, he just won the Super League in China. He was on the verge of getting sacked, wasn't he?
I think that was something to do with the fact he took the Chinese national job without consulting with Guangzhou Evergrande, and did 2 games with China, lost them both, and got fired from that, and then went back to Guangzhou Evergrande.
But he is obviously, he's the last defender ever to win the Ballon d'Or, so maybe he could bring something. If he could bring that defensive rigidity to a team in the Premier League. You just mentioned the lack of organisation and defences. It could be, he could be a success for maybe not a top club, but a middling Premier League team.
Yeah, true. But is the appetite there for Fabio Cannavaro to come to the Premier League? Because you've seen he didn't cut his teeth in Italy, didn't do what other managers have done and gone to like a German lower team in the Bundesliga, or go to Spain, or like David Wagner, go to a championship club. He went straight and followed the gravy train to China via Saudi Arabia.
But a lot of these managers you mentioned that go and end up, trying to learn the trade in Italy or in Germany and come to the Premier League, how many of them are actually a success? So maybe going a different way about it might work in his favour, because, he has experience of, it is the Chinese league, granted, but he has experience of winning a league.
Yeah, and if he can get teams to defend properly like Guangzhou Evergrande have done, he'd be a massive asset for Premier League football clubs. But I feel as though he's one of them glamour names, and that he's such up there in the pedestal of the great defenders who ever played football. He won a World Cup with Italy, played for the great Inter Milan teams of the early 2000s, played for the great Juventus team, and played for Real Madrid, even though it was a down period for Madrid at that time. And you've not really heard much of him up until recently when he's popped up again. And yet, I do think it coincides with the fact that the Chinese Super League is bringing in massive wage penalties for foreign stars, be that managers or players. I think that's got something to do with it.
I mean, yeah, you might see, and I thought before this situation happened, you might have seen a mass exodus of players out of China, simply because of the wages that they can now offer them, and the transfer fees that now have to be doubled to get them there in the first place. So I don't think there's any coincidence between Cannavaro being linked coming back into Europe, now that's happened. But I think winning any league it's not easy, whether it's a Chinese Super League or anywhere else. So it'll give you experience of high pressure games, because even in that league, there's still pressure on you to go and win it. You still have fans you want to play good football for. You still got a club you want to win trophies for. So obviously he's not going to go and jump and take over at Man City or Chelsea or something like that. But it's experience, I think, that is quite good, and it's not losing experience, like taking over a relegation-threatened Bundesliga team and getting relegated that year.
He has got a massive win percentage of 57.3% in his time as a manager, both in Saudi Arabia and in China. And you say about the Chinese Super League might not be that difficult to win. It's got massive hurdles that you've got to overcome as a manager to win that league. The travel's absolutely extortionate, going from Hong Kong up to Beijing, Shanghai, all the way up to the northern parts of China and all back again. You've got the pollution aspect, the fact that China's a very regulated state. There's not got the freedoms that players foreign players would have in countries, particularly in Western Europe. There's the money aspect of it. There's players going to get bored. You see the types of foreign players that go over there are branded with a mercenary tag. And there's also players like Marouane Fellaini or Oscar who want to prove something because it didn't quite go as they would have expected when they were in England at the tail end of their careers over here.
Yeah, I just think it would be interesting to see him come this way. I don't know. I get a sense that being a defender gives you slightly, a benefit maybe when you do go into management, as opposed to being someone like an attacker, like a Thierry Henry, who obviously went and failed at Monaco. Take Gary Neville out of the equation, but
particularly as a centre back in such great teams, playing against the best who ever played the game, when he was at Madrid or when he was at Italy, you have to understand the game and have the ability to read the game as it's progressing and how it dynamically changes throughout the course of 90 minutes. It's not like an attacker where you can pop out of the game for 60 minutes, then pop up, score a goal, and then everything's remembered. As a defender, you've got to be on 90 minutes at a time. You can't ever switch off, because once you switch off, an attacker's going to gain the advantage and score a goal.
Yeah, I just feel like being a defender gives you that benefit when you go into management. So, personally, I could see him going to the Premier League. You know, I circled West Ham just because it's the kind of club that would want someone of that caliber, you know, of that name, and has this revolving door policy of managers going at the minute trying to find out the right fit at the London Stadium.
So you tell me West Ham work in cycles, Aidan. Let's get this glamorous foreign manager who plays a nice brand of football with superstars, be it at Manchester City or the Chinese equivalent at Grandview Evergrande. Bring him in, promise the stars to the fans, go and get players who aren't quite good enough for the top teams in European football but believe they're these silky world-class operators. Felipe Anderson, for example. And then
that man takes some punishment on his podcast.
Oh, he does. We'll get to Joe Linton in a bit as well. We'll go after them all today. And then once you've got that manager, realise it's failed because that goes against the culture of what West Ham are as a working class club in the East End of London. Ship him out and then bring in David Moyes to right the ship and sack him once he keeps him up. Is that the pattern?
Sounds like I might have seen that story before, but I don't know. I think it's somewhere he could end up. It's a middling Premier League club where he can, you know, play his trade in England. He has the ability, I suppose, to sort them out defensively, given how good a defender he was. So I'm not saying it'll work. I'm not saying it's going to come, but I'm just saying I could see that scenario happening. And, you know, played it out in my head.
I've got a sneaky suspicion that he ends up at Newcastle United, because I think it's all too coincidental that the Saudi Arabians are back in the proposed takeover that is currently stalling a bit on Tyneside for Newcastle United, and he's got links to the Saudi Arabian peninsula in terms of managing with clubs before he went to China. And then this week he pops up as an interview on Sky Sports News on the football show with Gary Neville and Dave Jones. I think it's maybe he's dipping his feet in the water because he knows there might be opportunity at Newcastle should this takeover go ahead.
Possibly, yeah. There will always be opportunities in England because, you know, the way managers are booted out the door. And I feel like we've been through the cycle of those managers that kind of do the rounds of the bottom 10 clubs. I think they're kind of slowly being washed out. You know, your Big Sam, I think
Mike Hughes.
David Moyes is kind of clinging on a little bit of West Ham, but once he's been given the boot again, I don't think you'll see him back in English football for a long time. So I think that era is kind of coming to an end, and maybe that's where Cannavaro or someone like that comes in.
Yeah, but I couldn't imagine Cannavaro going to a team that's not willing to spend 150, 200 million over a few transfer windows.
Enter Newcastle. Assuming, of course, this takeover happens, which we haven't heard about anything of it for a while.
Well, he could go Newcastle even if it doesn't happen, Aidan, because Fabio Cannavaro would be an absolute pitcher in a Slazenger and Don A tracksuit.
Well, given their due, the Newcastle strength, I suppose, is being defensive. They can't score goals for toffee, so he wouldn't have a lot of work to do in the defensive part of it. And, you know, some of their top goal scorers are defenders because it's not their number 9 that famously can't score. So it's an interesting one, but I could see him turning up on these shores sooner rather than later.